Hey friends, welcome to the podcast today. I'm really happy to be kind of starting the show because we have Bill Brady here with us, who is the founder and CEO of Troomi. Welcome, Bill, to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you today.
Okay, so you traveled up from Utah to be here for our More Social, Less Media, a community gathering. And by the time this episode airs, the event will have, come and gone. And so I'm really looking forward to that. But what was really interesting about, and what we're going to dive into the show today was that not only, I think I invited you to come on the show. And one of the reasons was you had offered to do a workshop. And in one of the workshops, it wasn't just, hey, let's talk about the impact of social media on our kids. There was one on entrepreneurship and engaging teenagers in that way. And I was like, that's awesome. We don't have anything like that. And I was like, let's get this guy on the show. Let's get him on the show. So you are the, like I said, CEO and founder of Troomi. So tell me a little bit about what Troomi is, because I think some people don't know. So let's talk about it.
So Troomi is the kids' safe phone for digital wellness and positive mental health. And we describe it like that because, there are a variety of solutions out there and more coming to help parents create safe environments for kids, and we have different approaches and different functionality and different features. But I think the problem is bigger than just safety. And what parents are really thinking about is, how is my child doing? Digital safety and positive mental health, you can't decouple those things. They're inextricably connected. And so we've built Troomi in a way that helps parents create a safe environment for their kids, understand what their kids are doing with perfect visibility, have a high level of flexibility for custom fitting that phone environment to their child. But we also provide parents with insight into how their kids are doing. And we want to be on the very front edge of helping parents know ahead of time if their kids may be dealing with something that they're not talking about. And we just give them that extra peace of mind that they have just as much of a connection as possible with their kids.
Okay, that's really cool. So before you dive into all of those different things, I'm kind of a big fan of like a backstory. I love a good backstory, like when you watch the movies and they show you the movie. And then afterwards, the backstory comes out like on the character. I love those. I love those. I totally love those. So I'm curious, what was your why behind Troomi? Because you're you're a founder. So what was the why and kind of how did that get started? Because that's interesting to me.
So I've got a co-founder as well, and his name's Dave Priest. And we both have had a lot of experience in the past working with kids. We both have big families and have just been heartbroken by watching the tough stuff that kids are going through these days. You look at levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. They've never been higher among kids in this country. And frankly, not just the United States, but the Western world. And we just felt a need to say, hey, we've got to do things differently. When we started Troomi, there were some other solutions on the market that were trying to address the problem, but perhaps not as they weren't as practical as they needed to be to really help kids and give parents the flexibility they needed. So we really, are trying to help parents raise confident, happy, ready for the future kids. And we both just feel that to our core.
So then, Bill, I'm not an entrepreneur. That's not the world that I live in, but I interact with entrepreneurs. And so I'm kind of curious, and I think you'll kind of talk about this when you're talking about with teenagers too, but how do you get started in that? Because that's I get that's a big question, but when you're talking about specifically about Troomi in this area, how do you get started in that?
So one of the biggest things I tell people who are interested in entrepreneurship is the hardest part is just getting the nerve to say, I'm going to take the risk. You can figure out the steps, so in our case, it was figuring out, okay, if we do this, what do we need to build? From a software perspective, what do we need to build? And, is there a path for building it? How are we going to go to market? If we decide to move forward with this and put everything else in our lives on pause professionally, how do we go to market? What's the demand? And you just do all that work up front and figure out, we think we have a solution. Is this something that the market wants and needs and is willing to bring into their families? And so we did all that work up front. And that was, 6 months before we ever started building the product. And the biggest thing, and I remember the month and the day where I said to my wife, her name's Heidi, and she's awesome. And I said, hey, I think I'm going to leave everything I'm doing to start a new company. And it was in the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
And she said, okay.
I imagine, and like, it's super funny. So like you talk about risk, okay? Like the to have the nerve to take a risk. And my husband and I have both taken like those risk assessment things, like when you're looking at investments and stuff like that, like the investment planner guy woman wants to know, what type of risk are you comfortable with? And my husband and I are so risk averse. It's like, and, we had, I think there's good reason in some measure for that and some different things that we've experienced in our lives. But, and having said that, I also heard someone recently talk about how she was the first, I think it's the developer of Spanx. Like she's the first female self-made billionaire or something like that. I was reading like this article, and someone asked her like, well, how did you feel comfortable to take that risk? And she commented that when she was growing up, that her dad would ask her and her siblings once a week or something like this. I'm, kind of ad-libbing here a little bit, but like roughly once a week, what did you fail at this week? And so, just even little things or whatever, they would tell their dad. And she said that her dad would be disappointed if they didn't have something from the week, because in his mind, that meant they weren't stretching themselves. They weren't willing to kind of go out a little bit and see what that limit was that week. And I was just like, that's a really good, I feel like it's a way to build confidence in oneself, like internally, to be able to say, you know what, it's okay if I trip and fall and get down. I fail. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
There is a paradigm shift that we need to make. In society is so great at pointing out the people who are failing, the people who are losing. We have this unhealthy fixation on, well, if they're not doing well, that means I must be doing well. And social media is awful for that kind of thing, right? The paradigm, and I'm actually talking about this in the workshop.
Awesome.
The paradigm is we're not winning or losing. We're winning or learning. And most entrepreneurs who end up with something successful have had a few things that aren't successful first. And that's taught them the things that they need to know to be successful. They've learned off of every one of those experiences. And most entrepreneurs would not look back on those things that didn't go as planned, would not call them failures. They'd say, yeah, that one didn't go as like I thought it would. But you know what? I learned how to do, and there's some big takeaway that they take with them into the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. You're winning and you're learning. Is that what you said?
You're winning or you're learning.
You're winning or you're learning.
It's or both.
Or both.
But we can't consider losing a failure. Just calling it losing creates this negative aura, right? And instead, it's just like, no, it didn't go like I thought, but I learned from it. So it was successful.
Yeah, that's something that actually I've been learning from my producer, Matt, who is the host of the Ranch podcast. He's an entrepreneur and I clearly am not. And so I remember when I wanted to start this podcast, like I had already been on another podcast. A friend of mine had started it. She had invited me to be on the show and it was already like somewhat successful. And then I got on and I learned a lot about producing a podcast, because at that point I was doing all of it for that particular podcast and learning how to be on social media and all sorts of different things. And then I remember this feeling that I had of this podcast that, the first podcast that I've been invited onto was kind of her thing. And I loved it and I learned a ton. But there was this moment where I felt like I'm so good at supporting other people in their dreams. But Alexis, there's definitely something over here that I think I need to take. And so I remember having that conversation with my friend, and that was hard. And then kind of feeling that a little bit of an angst of like, okay, I'm stepping out into this world, and kind of developing this idea of the show. And I talked to another friend who's a school board member of my kid's school district, and he's also an entrepreneur. I don't think I've interacted with so many entrepreneurs in my life as I live down here. And so I asked him, I was like, what do you think about this idea of the show? And he was like, I think it's great. It's awesome. I love everything about it. And I was like, well, do you think I've developed it enough? I'm a bit of an academic. I was like, do you think I've developed this idea enough? And he was like, yeah, it's great. Just go for it. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm not quite sure. And he's like, Alexis, the hardest thing is kind of like that tipping point. He said, every time I do something, I'm a little nervous. He said, but you've just got to kind of push yourself kind of over that ledge. Just go for it. And he goes, listen, if you need someone to push you, and he was kind of sitting next to me, and he goes, I'll just push you. I'll just push you over. And so Matt, my producer now, we've had some experiences that haven't gone how we wanted. And it's interesting because he's always just like, we learned a lot of things. He's using that language that you're talking about. Anyways, I'm kind of reflecting as you're saying all these things.
I love that notion of just push yourself over the edge and get started. There's a quote that I share all the time, and anyone who's ever worked with me could quote it because I say it so much. It's from Harry S. Truman. Imperfect action always beats perfect inaction. Just start. Just do something, and it might not be perfect. And I have that perfectionist mentality. I have to push myself on this all the time and just say, it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's start. We'll learn from it and make it better. And we'll learn from it and make it better. And that's a process that frankly, you can apply to just about every area of life.
Yeah. So have you read the book Creativity Inc.?
I have not, I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Okay. So I read it when I was getting my master's, and it's by Ed Catmull, who is the the founder and president of Pixar. And this book is super fascinating because he talks about where he started and how he started Pixar and what he wanted to do with that company and how he reached that within kind of a 9-month period or whatever. He wanted to make the first computer animated, movie. And he did, right? Toy Story. That's what he's got. And so after he reached that, he talked about how he kind of wasn't quite sure what he was going to do. He was like, gosh, I reached it. I'm not quite sure. And he kind of meandered for a couple of months, kind of struggling. And then he realized, I want to make the best company to work at. I want Pixar to be the best place. And so he went, on a quest to do that. But one of the things that he talks about in the book, and my husband read it too, and was sharing about it with me later, he said, something that really stuck with him was that Catmull talks about how so often people who are just even leaders in business or whatever, they want to have all the steps in place before they take that first step. They, if there's 10 steps, they want all 10 steps lined out before they take the first. And Catmull too, that, point that you're commenting about Harry S. Truman, he basically is saying, just get started.
Yeah.
Just get started in that process. You're going to learn along the way.
And I've found the middle ground of, because I want to have the plan too.
Yeah.
But it's just understanding it's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Have a plan. Don't obsess to every single possible detail, but have a plan, have a strategy, but no, it will change based on the things that you learn as you go.
So it's interesting as you're talking about this, and I live in the education world. Our Kids Are Schools is all about school communities and, all the different working parts in that. And from my mind, that's a lot of things, because for me, anyone in a school community, it's a lot of people think school communities are just parents, teachers, and students, right? A lot of times that's kind of initially. And then I kind of come in and I'm like, well, but also in a school community, we're talking about school board members, we're talking about lawmakers and nonprofits, we're talking about business owners in the area, right? And our taxpayers and our neighbors and our city council and our mayor. All of these people in my mind are a part of a school community because they're all impacting our school community. And so when you talk about winning or and learning. How do you think that that fits into when we're talking about our school communities and being at school for kids? I know that's kind of like out there. It's not necessarily what you're here to talk about, but that's where my brain is going a little bit.
I think it's essential to have pay a lot of attention to the feedback of the all the stakeholders. You know, I think of parents and kids, and there are, excuse me, are so many issues these days where sometimes I feel like the people who know best are setting the agenda and forgetting to really understand what their constituents are thinking and feeling. And you can't have that cooperative relationship among all the stakeholders without constant and healthy communication and a desire to really understand what families want and need and do what's best for their kids. Those are probably topics we could go.
I know.
go down,
I know.
go a long way in other directions.
Well, it's interesting because this idea of, winning and or learning, and I love the idea of people being lifelong learners. I mean, it's kind of like one of the things that I think about on a somewhat regular basis. And I remember I'm a former school board member. And so I remember being a school board member, and they're bringing us data about, student, like the schools, the teachers, the students. We get to see kind of all of that data and break that down because we're student outcome driven essentially. And I'll never forget at one point sitting there looking at some of the, information and seeing a teacher that had always performed really well, but that particular year, her class hadn't performed well. They were far below what she had always helped produce in that classroom, acknowledging that teachers can only go so far in student outcomes. I'm saying that, but it was interesting. I remember the superintendent commenting about how, because some of the school board members were like, what's going on here? Like what in a somewhat maybe like perplexed, I'm not quite sure this is like what we're looking for here because there's so many, we're always looking, in education, sometimes they're always looking for specific outcomes. What's our return on investment and some of those types of things. And I remember the superintendent saying, we see this and we're addressing it and we're trying to figure out and learn what was going on in that classroom at that time. And I just kind of felt like he took this approach of a learner instead of labeling the teacher as a failure. And I think for me, that has so much value when I'm thinking about education and when I'm thinking about the idea of instead of labeling some of our experiences or, oh, that kid failed, it's like, well, no, like let's, rephrasing that idea for kids to understand that, listen, I remember being in college and like, it was my first time at the testing center at BYU. And I come, on this testing center at BYU. I'd never experienced anything like this before. Like I walk in and there's this huge room. I swear there were 1,000 chairs in this room. And that's where you like take the Scantron test and you give it to the person and you walk down the stairs. And, at the time there was a screen right up there in front of you. And like I'd been the valedictorian of my high school. And this was the first test that I took at the testing center. And I was like, I got this. And I come walking down and I look up and I see my student ID number and I look across and I see 72% flashing before my eyes. And I remember just thinking like, oh no. And I was on my way back to my dorm and I called my parents and I was just in tears. And I just remember thinking like, I'm terrible. This is like, I just bombed. And I remember my dad was like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. Like, it's one, like, just move on. It's just, one test. Now you're knowing a little bit more about me a little in my, like, 18th year of life. But I think that mentality of what you're talking about really has a, what's the word? It has a place in education, I think, for me in school communities.
I agree with that. I had a professor actually when I was getting my master's degree, and it was an accounting class. I have a master's degree in business, and it was an accounting class that the program used to weed a lot of people out. It was fairly difficult. And the professor, though, he didn't want the students to just be worried about like the anxiety. He didn't want them focused on, did I get a 95 or a 90 or a 98 or a 60? Like he just wanted us to learn. And so he would always say before, tests or exams, hey, everyone remember, this is not a life event. Like, just enjoy it. Be here for the learning. Don't be stressing. Just focus on learning. It was funny on the final exam day. He says, "Okay, this is kind of a life event."
Yeah.
But we all knew, he was just having some fun with us. But yeah, we got to focus on learning. And if we obsess so much about like a grade, it's kind of a distraction. Let's focus on learning.
Yeah.
I had frankly a much better experience in my master's degree because I was just in love with the learning. Whereas in my undergraduate, it was, okay, how do I get the 95 and the 98? And, it was a different process.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love learning and I could literally talk about it for hours. Like I said, I'm a bit of a nerd. But I want to bring it back to kind of what you at Troomi then, what you are doing in regards to your parent engagement and the impact on families and what you've learned in integrating that into the mission of Troomi.
Yeah, so the thing we're trying to help parents with, it's clear that parents all across this country, and frankly, in other Western countries, feel absolutely overwhelmed by all of the questions stemming from kids and technology. Everything on the beginning end of that spectrum, when do I get my child their first phone? That's the first question that families deal with. That evolves into, well, everyone else seems to be doing it. And that evolves into, if I'm going to do this, and hopefully this question is being asked, if we're going to do this, how do we do it safely? And then how do you deal with those questions that come up and potential challenges that come up, especially if you haven't taken a safe approach? How do you deal with those challenges that not just may arise, but probably will? And so our goal has been to take that feeling of being overwhelmed out of it. And we think the parent should be the hero. We're the tool or the guide that helps them to manage the introduction of technology into their kids' lives. We don't want to take the place of parents, but we want to make sure that they feel confident and empowered and have some tools to give their kids the best of technology without all the garbage.
So what specifically does Troomi do? I mean, you talked about how what are some things that your device has, like when you're looking at the device and then you're looking at like what's for parents? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the kids get a device it's a Samsung phone, 50 megapixel camera, nice screen. It's an Android, nice Samsung phone. And for them, it just looks and feels like any other Android, except that it's got some protections in place that are managed by the parent through what we call the Troomi Parent Portal. So the Parent Portal is an online, web-based app. Parents can get to it from any device, any platform. And they're custom fitting the child's phone environment to that child. So if you have a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, you can set that device up for them very quickly and easily in a way that matches their needs and maturity. So for example, you'd start a younger kid with talk and text only, just basic texting, basic ability to call people, and then introduce more features and functions as that child gets over. You move them from just basic texting to group and picture texting. You perhaps introduce some apps that they need for school or church or music or healthy hobbies. You can introduce a safe web browser. By default, there's no browser enabled on the device, but you can enable a safe web browser. and really custom fit this environment for each kid. Some of the very specific functions, contact safe listing. So it's one thing to say, hey, my child can only talk and text. But if they can talk and text with anyone, that defeats the purpose. And so we created a safe listing technology that as a parent, you maintain that contact list. And if someone's not on the list, they can't reach your child and your child can't reach them. But the beauty about the way we did that is we did it with flexibility. So that as a child matures and they learn safety standards and use good judgment, you can let them add phone numbers without having to have them approved, and which makes it relevant and useful for an older child. Content filtering. And this is an important one. You think of the things that are incoming and outgoing on text messages, and kids are texting a lot more than they're talking.
Yes.
By far. And we actually have all the data on that, but it's astounding, the number of text messages that go in and out. And with our content filtering turned on, we're using AI to automatically block anything that is the egregious stuff. So even if someone's on the approved contact list and in a moment of stupidity, they decide to send your child an inappropriate picture, we're not just going to tell you that the picture was sent, we're going to intercept it. Your child is not going to see it. You're still going to get notified so you can address the situation. Likewise with the worst of the swear words, with content filtering turned on, those are automatically blocked. But from there, you can also set the sensitivity. So when it comes to images, for example, obviously I don't want my child seeing pornography, but maybe depending on their age and stage, I don't even want them seeing a girl in a bikini. And I can set that sensitivity. The other really cool thing about that is our system, and this is a little different than others, is that we're not just looking at the incoming stuff. It also is intercepting outgoing stuff. So if in a moment of poor judgment, a child decides to send they get tricked, conned, coerced, persuaded into sending an inappropriate picture of themselves, it's going to get intercepted. And you can read the tragic news stories that seem to be far too frequent of kids that send an inappropriate picture with the worst outcomes you can imagine. So that's really important.
Wow. Those are a lot of things. And one of the things that's interesting, like you mentioned that I hadn't heard before, was outgoing, catching those kids in a moment of like poor judgment where and the reality is that I've talked to a lot of parents and sometimes I hear stories and parents are just like, I just didn't think my kid would do that. And there is, that parent is feeling, unfortunately a lot of shame in that moment. And as I'm listening to them, as a friend or, whatever in a community setting, I'm just like, listen, I get it. Kids are going to do things in moments with poor judgment because they're kids and they're learning. And it's just and they have this thing in front of them that gives them access to the world in a way that I never experienced, the way that you never experienced. So here, listen, we're parents, we're navigating through this. Let's be supportive of each other instead of, that judgment.
And when kids make mistakes, turn it into learning opportunities, not shaming opportunities. Think back to when we were kids. We didn't have smartphones and all the social media stuff. But I think of a common thing that, a lot of parents dealt with when I was a kid. Let's say your child steals a pack of gum from the convenience store. Well, that's a fantastic learning opportunity. You discover that, wow, this pack of gum was stolen. You talk to them about why that's wrong. Hey, we don't do that in our family. Here's what it means to be honest. To make this right, we're going to go down to the convenience store and you're going to, return this to the store owner. And that child learns a lesson. They didn't feel shamed. And if you do it right, they feel like, wow, I made a mistake, but I fixed it. And I'm a good person. As opposed to, you made a mistake and you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And you're irredeemable. And it's the same thing with kids and phones. Kids are going to make mistakes sometimes. We give them an environment where we're really limiting the opportunities for those mistakes. But when there is, it could even just be I'm using my phone when I agreed I wouldn't use my phone, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Try and stay away from that shaming, and turn it into a learning opportunity.
Well, I love that. And in part, I mean, one of the valuable, effects that comes from that, I feel like when we turn those moments into learning, right? Like, hey, we're here. We're just going to address this problem. We're just going to take care of it. You're going to, learn is that child learns that the adult in their life, that parent, is a safe person for them to turn to. And then they're going to keep turning to you in those moments, because instead of mom or dad reacting and getting mad, or, having their own shame and laying it on top of their child, because listen, I get it. We're adults, we have feelings too. And at the same time, it's it's our job as a parent and in the adult in the moment to really work to manage those feelings, even if we're in total shock that our kid did that thing, because I get it. We, be in that total shock moment. But as best we can, and we're learning as parents to take those opportunities to help your kid learn that you are a safe place to come to, because our kids need to feel that in this world, because there's going to be stuff that happens with tech and on cell phones and in the real world when they're interacting as they're learning, and they need to learn that mom and dad are a safe place to come to.
With cell phones, more than anything else, shame is what breeds that feeling of, I have to keep this a secret. And when things are a secret, that's when they turn into problems. So you've got to be just take young kids and the notion of pornography. Your kids have got to feel safe that they can, if they've bumped into an inappropriate image, they don't have to hide it. They need to come and say, Mom, I just found something terrible on the internet and I wanted to tell you. But if they feel like they're going to be, you did what? You found what? They're not going to do that. And that's when a problem can develop.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So can you be specific then? At the very beginning, you mentioned that Troomi works to focus on also, you said something about the well-being of the child, that was something specific to a component of your mission. How does it do that?
There are a couple ways. So first, and our parents love this. So for parents who want it, we provide absolute visibility into what's going on the child's device. Take something as simple as checking in periodically on your child's text messages. No one enjoys that moment of, okay, it's Saturday night, time for me to check your messages. What's your password again? No one, the kid hates that. The parent hates that. So we've made that remote text monitoring, or that text monitoring, I should say, we've made that a remote process. So you can see at any time, in real time, in the context of actual conversations, what's going on. And that gives a really great feel for how your child's doing. But obviously you can't and don't want to read every text message.
You're right.
So we boil all of that up into a word cloud. So you can see in 10 seconds, this immediate overview of the things that my child's talking about and the words that they're using. And that's extremely informative. So if all the words are happy, upbeat, positive, and the themes of the conversations are, doing things with friends and success in school and my hobbies and my sports, wonderful. But if a child is in a tougher place, you're going to see that reflected as well. We've also introduced a phenomenal technology we call Trudy. And Trudy's a chatbot that kids can talk to in a very safe way. And I want to remind parents all the time when we talk about this, kids are using tools right now like ChatGPT. And they can ask ChatGPT anything and everything and get all manner of responses. And probably conversations that you wouldn't want your child having. So what we did is we said, hey, as long as kids are going to be asking those questions, let's provide a safe way to do that. So we created this chatbot called Trudy. Kids can ask Trudy anything and have a safe conversation. It's guardrailed. So If a child asks, for example, an inappropriate question that would lead to typically an inappropriate conversation, Trudy's not going to engage in that. It's going to send the child back to their parent. But what we're seeing is that kids are having a great experience, having an interaction with Trudy that helps them with emotional resilience, with emotional problem solving. On the back end of that, parents are getting visibility in the parent portal as to what are my child's predominant emotions. What are the themes that they're thinking about, worrying about? So, for example, you could go in and see, hey, my daughter is anxious, stressed out of her mind. And then as a parent, you're saying, okay, is that a today thing or is that a theme? You can see that tracked over time and then see insights. Sally is stressed out today because she has a final exam in math. Okay, in context, I get it. Or, Sally's really in a tough place because she's still dealing with the death of her grandmother. And it's not meant in any way to take the place of a parent, but it gives parents additional touch points with which they can connect with their kids. And we don't have time to get into it, but lots of even personal experiences I can share with that where it's been really, really effective.
Well, I'd love for you to share. I mean, we have time for, something if you
Yeah,
have one. I love to hear the personal stories.
So this one's really personal. We have a 15-year-old daughter who uses our product, as you would imagine. And very, very, very tragically, on the first day of school this year, a friend of hers died by suicide. And our daughter was one of the last people that he talked to. She had no idea. In a million years, she had no clue that this young man was dealing with anything. In fact, they had been at an audition for a school play, and he was helping her rehearse her lines. He was encouraging her. You've got this. You're so talented. Like he was the boy that was encouraging the other kids. And Ainsley had no idea that he was dealing with anything. And so our relationship with her is such that she, immediately talked to us about it. And we went out of our way to talk to her about it every day. Every day. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Because you can imagine her regret, her remorse, her guilt. Like she was feeling all these really complex emotions. And it got to the point where she didn't seem to be as worried about it. And, time went by and we stopped talking about it. A couple months later, in the parent portal, because of her interactions with Trudy, we see, wow, Ainsley is still really confused and feeling regret about this loss of her friend. And it gave us the insight that we needed to be able to go back and say, hey, how are you doing really in regard to your friend? And as parents, then it gave us the tool that we needed to understand, is this something that we can help her with just through more conversation, or do we need to get her some help? And that's the beauty of it. Overall, the way Troomi is built, we're keeping kids out of those dark places, and where you see so many kids in mental health crisis these days. We think that less time on screens, not getting into social media, staying away from bullies and predators and all these things, that's immediately going to help kids to not go into these dark places. But if they do get into a tough situation, or they're dealing with stress, anxiety, or depression, we hope that we're an early warning system. We're not a therapist. We're not diagnosing anything. We're just giving parents information to help them help their kids as effectively as possible.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. And I send my, deepest condolences to your daughter and all the people involved in that, because that is, just deeply so sorrowful and
Tragic.
Super tragic. And unfortunately, I think, as you and I both know, and adults so many people in the world, these are like sad things that are a part of our reality. And in my own family, like we had an experience with a family member that died by suicide. And this was a long time ago, long before it was, unfortunately a little bit more common. And as you're telling your story, I just am feeling like a lot of gratitude that you had this product that helped you and your wife like understand what was going on for your daughter. Because as parents, like, to your point, it's just so, we want to be there for our kids. And what I feel like you're describing in this product with this component of parent engagement and understanding this piece is like, when you developed this product, and I want to be really clear, like, I'm not getting paid for any of these things. Like, I just feel like I should say that at this moment. Like, I invited you on, you're a guest, that's it. But what I'm hearing in this story of Troomi and the development of it is that there's a component of upstream prevention that you and your co-founder have worked into this product. And today, at More Social, Less Media, and people can go find her later, is Dr. Megan Smith, who's a professor at Boise State, and she has the organization called Communities for Youth. And what Communities for Youth does for the state of Idaho are they go in and they help communities focus on upstream prevention for our kids. What types of safety things can we put in up here so that when stuff happens down here, we're built in and ready to go for it to address those hard things that our kids are dealing with, just like you addressed with your daughter?
Last summer, I was invited to speak at the Indiana Governor's Summit on mental health. And I was asked to talk specifically about kids and how all the different stakeholder groups, from healthcare providers to legislators to teachers, and especially parents, and frankly, the business community, how do we all work together to reverse these really negative trends in mental health? And the keynote speaker was Dr. Jerome Adams, who had been the Surgeon General before our current Surgeon General. And he just made it clear to the audience. He said, we cannot keep up with the demand. There aren't enough providers. There aren't enough resources. We cannot keep up with this mental health crisis. And, I spoke after him and I just acknowledged, we can't. So instead of trying to dig kids out of the hole, why don't we stop them from going into the hole? And, help get back to, if you've read The Anxious Generation, get back to a play-based childhood instead of a screen-based childhood. So important. And then put these protections in place so that we're really, as much as we can, reducing the possibility that they're going to get into harmful behaviors before we have to, really dig them out of dark places.
I agree. You are totally speaking my language here. And I want to, before we end this episode, not everyone's going to be able to come to this workshop today with, entrepreneurs for teens. So I wanted you to kind of touch on some of those things that you're going to cover during that workshop, because I'm excited about it.
So I love talking about this because it's a perfect example. This notion of entrepreneurship with kids. There are so many great things that kids can do with their lives and their time if life is bigger than doom scrolling and being on video games for 10 hours a day. There's so much more that life has to offer. And I'm actually going to talk about 3 examples of kids who have built little successful businesses and give kids some insights into, you can do this. You can do this. And here's some easy steps to follow if you have an idea that you would like to take from, hey, I could maybe make some money doing that, and just some practical advice on how to take that idea and turn it into a revenue generating business, even if you're 13.
Oh, I love that. Like, my 13-year-old's going to be there today, and I'm like, I'm going to send her to that workshop. I love that. That's awesome.
I'm going to tell the story of, she's 21 now, But my oldest daughter started a business when she was 12,
Mm-hmm.
making chocolate and caramel covered pretzel rods. And she made thousands and thousands of dollars as a teenager in this business. Even took herself with some friends on a trip to Costa Rica,
Oh my
and
gosh.
we didn't pay a dime. Like
Whoa.
she's, we'll tell that story and a couple others that, I want to leave kids with the feeling of I can do that too, and it'll be fun.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, at the end of every episode, I always do a takeaway. Like what am I taking away from this conversation? I ask my guests to do one and I do one, kind of like a summation of, kind of what we talked about. Would you like me to go first or would you like to go first, Bill?
Hey, go ahead.
Okay. So, like from this conversation, there's kind of two things that I'm like really pulling from this is that one, I love that this idea of learning. It resonates with my soul. And I love that learning is a part, I'm learning that it's a part of entrepreneurship. It's a part of life, and risk taking is so important for adults and for kids, and that we can just help them with this, this mentality shift of just learning, winning and or learning. I love it. I love it. And then the other thing is like, just that it deeply warms my heart that you have developed this product with the intention, you have integrated upstream prevention into this product, and with real intention for kids and for parents. And I just am so appreciative. I mean, I'm learning firsthand, I'm learning like in real time, about Troomi. And so I just love that that's a part of your product. I love that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm left with something I think about a lot, and that is, so many parents feel overwhelmed because they don't know where to start. And it's easy for society to focus on the scary stories. And there are certainly things that we have to know and we have to be aware of, and we have to understand, hey, there are really negative things out there that we need to protect our kids from, whether that's, specific dangers or just a digital lifestyle that leads to negative mental health outcomes. Anything that zaps a child's potential. And I just want to scream, you don't have to feel overwhelmed. There are solutions out there that will, empower you as parents and take the stress out of that sometimes contentious relationship between parents and kids and technology. And there are other answers, other solutions, and you don't have to feel that way. We want families to be happy and healthy, and certainly removing this component of family stress makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, and also for coming to More Socialist Media. You drove up with your son from Utah, and not all of our vendors could do that. And so we really appreciated you taking the time to come up here and be with us in the Treasure Valley. It's going to be awesome.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, and good luck to you in this development and continuing of your product. This is awesome.
Thank you.